To the rest of the world, Cuba is a vibrant time capsule, a romantic postcard forever suspended in the golden glow of the 1950s. We imagine sun-drenched coastal drives in candy-colored Cadillacs, the intoxicating rhythm of salsa echoing through colonial plazas, and the sweet, heavy scent of premium cigars dancing on the warm Caribbean breeze. It is a cinematic paradise of pastel facades and eternal summer. But look closer, beyond the curated tourist squares where Che Guevara's monumental face looks down, and the colorful illusion shatters into a profound, gritty truth. Being stuck in the 1950s is not a nostalgic, aesthetic choice. It is a harsh, daily reality forged by decades of isolation. Today, the grand avenues of Havana are often eerily empty. There is no fuel to run those iconic vintage engines, and a stifling silence replaces the roar of traffic. When the sun sets, there is often no electricity to light up the night, plunging entire neighborhoods into absolute darkness. Behind the crumbling, majestic Spanish architecture, families do not live a vintage dream. They survive. They are forced to chop firewood just to boil water and cook their meals in the shadows of their own homes. This is not a retro paradise. It is an island of breathtaking contradictions, where an unbreakable human spirit wages a daily, beautiful, and brutal war of survival offline, with empty ATMs and defiant smiles. This is the story of life in Cuba. The Cuban morning does not begin with the mechanical roar of rush hour traffic or the bright hum of neon signs. At 5 in the morning, Havana is cloaked in a heavy, almost eerie silence. With the power grid frequently failing and fuel tanks bone dry, the city awakens in profound darkness. The first sensory detail that hits you is not sound, but scent, the salty, humid breath of the Caribbean Sea rolling over the Malecón, instantly tangling with the sharp, stinging aroma of burning wood. Behind the majestic, decaying facades of Spanish colonial buildings, an ancient rhythm takes over. Listen closely, and the silence is shattered by a sound belonging to another century, the rhythmic, heavy thud of an axe splitting firewood on a tiled floor. Without electricity or gas, families are forced to build small fires within the shadowed courtyards of their own homes just to boil water. The faint, metallic clink of a battered espresso maker, a cafetera, soon follows, brewing the dark, intensely sweet Café Cubano that fuels the island's spirit. As the sky shifts from ink black to a bruised, pastel pink, the human hustle begins long before the sun is fully up. Instead of the chaotic honking of commuter cars, the streets fill with the soft shuffling of footsteps and hushed conversations. Neighbors, their faces illuminated only by the glow of a single battery-powered flashlight or a flickering candle, gather outside the local bakery. They stand in long, snaking queues, enduring hours of waiting just to secure a daily ration of bread. It is a morning of heartbreaking contrast. The tranquil golden light washing over the crumbling, pastel-colored balconies is undeniably cinematic, yet it masks the fierce, exhausting effort required simply to start the day. There is no romanticized vintage charm in these early hours. There is only the raw, tactile reality of survival. You feel the grit of the ashes in the air, the warmth of the small fires, and the undeniable resilience of a people pushing through the darkness, waiting for the light. To understand the true heartbeat of Havana, one must look beyond the crumbling colonial facades and peer into the solars, the crowded, shared courtyards that form the veins of the city. Here, privacy is a luxury of the past, and isolation is entirely impossible. When the infrastructure of a nation slowly crumbles, the human infrastructure naturally takes its place. Inside the dim, high-ceilinged apartments of Centro Havana, 3, sometimes 4 generations are packed into a single, peeling room. The abuela, the revered matriarch, sits in a frayed wicker chair by the open balcony, fanning herself against the stifling Caribbean heat. She is the undisputed anchor of the household, the keeper of the family's rationing book, the libreta. Her hands, weathered by decades of perpetual scarcity, meticulously calculate every grain of rice and every ounce of dark sugar allotted to them. She watches over the neighborhood children playing in the narrow, shadowed street below, her eyes serving as a constant source of security in an intensely unpredictable world. When physical walls fail, the community simply merges. Consider a dilapidated gymnasium in the heart of the old city. When a centuries-old residential building collapsed into dust, it did not scatter the residents, it compressed them. Today, over 14 families share this single, echoing hall, their lives separated only by hanging bedsheets and unspoken boundaries of respect. In this dense proximity, the concept of a solitary struggle dissolves. If one family manages to secure a precious ration of pork or beans, the aroma of the boiling stew inevitably drifts across the room, becoming a shared comfort. They are bound together not by choice, but by the fierce, collective necessity of endurance. This profound interdependence extends far beyond shared walls. It is the very currency of their daily lives. In a world largely disconnected from the global internet, the Cuban people have forged their own offline web of human connection. In the fading afternoon light, a young man becomes the neighborhood's most vital hub, passing a battered USB drive from hand to hand. This is the black market of digital life, a modern ritual of sharing joy. And when they gather in a sweltering local cinema to watch a 20-year-old film, they sit shoulder to shoulder in the oppressive heat. When the power inevitably cuts out 20 minutes into the screening, plunging the theater into absolute darkness, there is no outrage. Instead, a collective sigh ripples through the crowd, followed by a shared, knowing laughter, a communal acknowledgement of their absurd, shared reality. There was a time when the neighborhood watch the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution meant neighbors closely monitoring one another, a system built on political suspicion. But time and exhaustion have quietly rewritten the unspoken rules. Today, the watchful eyes of the community are no longer looking for dissent. They are desperately looking out for each other. When the water truck finally arrives after 20 days of drought, the alert spreads not through official channels, but through a rapid, frantic chain of voices echoing down the street, ensuring the elderly and the frail are not left behind. The Cuban family unit stretches far beyond bloodlines. They are a people perpetually waiting for bread, waiting for electricity, waiting for a change that never seems to arrive. Yet, in those endless, exhausting queues, they do not stand alone. They lean on one another, weaving an invisible, unbreakable safety net that catches them when the system lets them fall. In Cuba, the ultimate act of defiance is not a loud protest. It is this unwavering, fierce devotion to community. To truly understand the soul of Cuba, you must look past the vibrant vintage cars and step into the shadowed, stifling heat of its kitchens. Here, culinary culture is not a lavish display of Caribbean abundance. It is a breathtaking, daily masterclass in alchemy and survival. The rhythm of nourishment is not dictated by the sprawling aisles of a supermarket, but by a small, frayed paper booklet, the libreta, the national rationing book. Its pages, worn soft by decades of anxious thumbing, represent the fragile, unpredictable lifeline between a family and hunger. Before the cooking even begins, there is the waiting. You stand in line at the local bodega, a state-run distribution store with high, dusty shelves that are heartbreakingly bare. You can smell the musty scent of old wood and the earthy tang of raw sugar spilling from burlap sacks. The interactions here are a symphony of patience and frustration, a shared communal sigh as the shopkeeper carefully weighs out the monthly allotment. A few pounds of rice, a cup of black beans, a measure of oil, and coarse sugar. It is never enough, yet it is everything. With these precious rations secured, the real battle begins at home. Imagine stepping into a high-ceilinged colonial apartment in the heart of Centro Havana. The first thing that assaults your senses is not the rich aroma of roasting pork, but the sharp, acrid sting of wood smoke. With the national power grid frequently collapsing and cooking gas an impossible luxury, the modern kitchen has been violently pulled back into a primal state. On the beautiful, cracked Spanish tiles of a once grand courtyard, a mother kneels. She feeds splintered scraps of scavenged wood, perhaps pieces of a broken chair or branches dragged from a distant park into a small, makeshift fire built right on the floor. The heat is immediate, aggressive, and oppressive, trapping the humid Caribbean air inside the poorly ventilated room. Sweat beads heavily on her forehead and runs stinging into her eyes, mingling with the involuntary tears brought on by the blinding smoke. Today, she is preparing the absolute foundation of the Cuban identity: potaje de frijoles negros with rice. It sounds deceptively simple, but in this context, bringing a hot meal to the table is a daily triumph of the human will. You watch as a battered aluminum pot is balanced precariously over the open, licking flames. When a meager, carefully rationed spoonful of oil hits the hot metal, it sizzles violently, spitting into the ash. Into this, she drops a precious handful of crushed garlic, a sliver of onion, and a pinch of cumin, ingredients often bartered for on the black market. The scent that suddenly erupts into the smoky, suffocating air is intoxicating. It is the undeniable, mouth-watering aroma of sofrito, the holy trinity of Cuban flavor that stubbornly persists, cutting through the smell of burning wood and hardship. The black beans, meticulously sorted and soaked overnight, are added to the pot, simmering slowly over the unpredictable heat of the embers. You can hear the low, thick, rhythmic bubbling of the dark stew, a comforting percussion against the eerie silence of a blacked-out city. There is no meat today, no luxurious cuts of beef to enrich the broth. The depth of flavor relies entirely on the cook's ancestral knowledge, her almost magical ability to coax richness from the bare minimum. A heavy spoonful of dark, unrefined sugar is stirred in at the last moment, perfectly balancing the earthy savoriness with that signature Cuban sweetness. When the meal is finally ready, it is served on mismatched plates under the faint, wavering glow of a single candle. You sit on a faded wooden chair, feeling the intense, residual heat of the room and the gritty texture of ash that seems to coat your skin. But then, you take the first bite. The rice is perfectly tender, soaking up the rich, velvety, black bean stew. It is intensely flavorful, carrying the unmistakable, charred kiss of the indoor wood fire. It doesn't taste like poverty. It tastes like profound, unconquerable resilience. And even here, in the dim, smoky heat of this brutal reality, the cultural soul refuses to be silenced. From a battery-powered radio across the dark courtyard, the infectious beat of a rumba spills into the night air. It is a visceral reminder that the Cuban spirit cannot be extinguished. They cook in the dark, they sweat over open flames, and yet they still find the strength to tap their feet. This is the true flavor of Cuba, a bitter, exhausting struggle swallowed with a defiant, beautiful sweetness. While the world sees Cuba through the romantic lens of pristine vintage cars gliding effortlessly along the Malecon, the true economic engine of this island does not hum with factory precision. It clanks, grinds, and survives through grease, sweat, and a breathtaking, desperate ingenuity. This is not an economy dictated by global trade or corporate boardrooms. It is the raw, informal microeconomy of the sidewalk. It is a relentless daily hustle, driven by an unyielding spirit of self-reliance. Look closely at the men bending under the propped-open hoods of those iconic 1951 Chevrolets. They are not nostalgic hobbyists, restoring classic beauties. They are the island's unsung street engineers. When a water pump fails or a transmission cracks, they cannot simply order a replacement part. Instead, in the stifling heat of makeshift garages, they must forge solutions from scrap. Covered in thick motor oil, they cast their own metal, coaxing life back into fading steel with sheer mechanical alchemy. Every roar of a revived engine is a hard-won victory against the decay of time. But the daily hustle extends far beyond these curbside mechanics. In a nation where fuel has become a phantom luxury, basic mobility is a constant, exhausting battle. Stand outside the grand, eerily empty car dealerships, and the silence is deafening. Instead of pulling up to a pump, citizens are trapped in a digital waiting game. You can almost feel the collective, heavy anxiety as a driver stares at his cracked smartphone screen, scrolling through an app, realizing he has been waiting 3 months just for a precious allotment of 20 liters of gasoline. This agonizing, pervasive scarcity forces the Cuban people into the bustling, whispered shadows of the black market. It is not a place of malice, but a necessary, vibrant ecosystem that pulses fiercely beneath the surface of official commerce. Here, survival is meticulously bartered. The formal salaries of doctors and teachers are painfully insufficient, rendering the local peso almost powerless. Therefore, alternative currencies emerge. A mechanic's skill is traded for a rare cut of pork. A digital movie, downloaded onto a battered USB drive, becomes a valuable commodity in a society largely disconnected from the global web. The people of Havana do not simply work to earn a living. They hustle relentlessly to outwit a rigid system that is constantly failing them. Their profound resourcefulness is not a romantic lifestyle choice, but a daily, grinding necessity. Yet, within their oil-stained hands, their whispered street corner trades, and their fierce determination to keep the wheels of their lives turning against all odds, there exists an undeniable, magnificent dignity. To portray Cuba merely as a nostalgic, sun-drenched time capsule of the 1950s would be a profound disservice to its undeniable reality. The truth of daily life here is incredibly heavy, defined by a systemic fragility that relentlessly tests the limits of human endurance. To truly understand Havana, one must bravely look past the romanticized lens of tourist postcards and confront the gritty, exhausting challenges that shape its present. There is absolutely no romantic charm in the profound collapse of basic infrastructure. Behind the majestic, pastel-colored Spanish colonial architecture, walls are quietly surrendering to time, humidity, and neglect. When a centuries-old residential building in old Havana finally crumbled into dust, the tragedy pushed more than 14 families to seek desperate refuge in an abandoned gymnasium. Here, they live compressed together, their private lives separated only by hanging bedsheets and cardboard, bound by the shared trauma of losing their homes. Even the most fundamental elements of survival require a daily battle. Clean, running water is a precious luxury, sometimes arriving only once every 15 to 21 days. Families are forced to hoard every precious drop in makeshift tanks, rationing water for drinking, cooking, and washing with absolute precision. This physical decay is mirrored by a harsh, deeply unequal economic reality. While the state provides basic social guarantees, the financial math of daily survival simply does not add up. A dedicated teacher earns a formal salary of roughly 5,000 pesos, equivalent to just $10 or $12 a month. Citizens line up for hours in the stifling heat outside grand, architecturally beautiful banks, only to find the ATMs completely empty of cash. Most heartbreaking is the stark, visible divide in the consumer world. Modern, well-stocked luxury stores exist in the city, but their doors are effectively closed to the average Cuban, as they accept only foreign currencies like US dollars or euros. This creates a painful, two-tiered society. Those who have relatives abroad to send them digital remittances, and those who are left behind to rely entirely on the bare shelves of the state rationing system. For the youth of Cuba, this reality translates into a daunting, claustrophobic future. An architecture student sits in a dim apartment, forced to study online because her renowned university is temporarily closed. When asked if she is happy with this life, the answer is a blunt, heartbreakingly honest no. The sheer physical exhaustion of standing in line for 3 hours just to secure a single loaf of bread for tomorrow's breakfast slowly drains the ambition and energy from the next generation. The vibrant, revolutionary watchfulness of the past, where neighbors monitored neighbors, has been quietly replaced by a desperate, collective focus on fulfilling basic daily needs. Consequently, a profound brain drain bleeds the island of its brightest minds, as almost everyone shares a whispered, urgent dream of leaving. Life in Cuba is not a flawless, cinematic paradise. It is a raw, exhausting marathon of survival. Yet, explicitly acknowledging this brutal truth is the only way to truly honor the breathtaking resilience of the people who wake up in the dark to face it every single day. With all these challenges, why do they choose to stay? When the power grids fail, when the store shelves are heartbreakingly bare, and when the younger generation whispers urgent, desperate dreams of leaving, what is the invisible, magnetic force that still anchors so many to this crumbling, beautiful island? The answer is found not in political ideologies or economic statistics, but in the profound, undeniable power of their roots. They stay because the physical geography of Cuba is inextricably bound to the geography of their souls. They stay for the abuela, who still remembers the exact ancestral recipe for a perfect sofrito, for the shared, knowing laughter that erupts in a blacked-out cinema, and for that unbreakable, fierce devotion to a community that refuses to let anyone fall. When the system collapses, The people simply become the infrastructure in a modern, hyper-connected world that is relentlessly speeding up, obsessed with rapid accumulation, instant gratification, and digital validation. The Cuban reality offers a jarring but desperately needed life lesson. Here, stripped of modern conveniences and forced offline, people have no choice but to be entirely, rawly present. They cannot escape into the distraction of glowing screens. They must sit on their stoops in the fading evening light and look each other directly in the eye. They have mastered the profound, almost forgotten art of finding genuine joy not in what they own, but in who they are with. It is a philosophy of slow living, forged not by a trendy lifestyle choice, but by absolute necessity, teaching us that human connection is the ultimate, indestructible currency. The true wealth of Cuba is not locked inside those grand, empty bank vaults. It lives and breathes in the infectious rhythm of the rumba played on a battered wooden drum, in the warm, grease-stained hands of a street mechanic casting his own metal, and in the defiant, beautiful smiles that greet the punishing morning sun. This is an island that teaches us how to endure the darkest of nights simply by becoming the light for one another. And as long as the warm Caribbean waves continue to embrace the ancient stone of the Malecón, the heart of Cuba will keep beating steady, fiercely proud, and beautifully unbroken.